Good morning, everyone. Welcome to American Scouser's morning coffee or tea with American Scouser. It's Wednesday, back to being the greatest dad. Which Angie was actually noticing it the other day. There's like supposed to be. I mean, at one point, I take my word for it that this is the world's greatest dad mug. Because at one point there was like a poem and stuff there. You kind of see the writing now, but the rest of it is it's here. But it's not on the mug. As close second father is Gordo over here. Gordo, what's happening?
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, that's the fading goes with how you become the greatest father and you've slowly faded out of it. That's
Okay, well, this is your last show. John, enjoy it while you can, buddy. No, but the front is still says greatest dad. But maybe I should stop washing it or something.
stop washing.
Dry wash it somehow. I don't know what's gonna happen. But John, what's happening?
Hey, what's going on, everyone? I think I butchered my spelling of connoisseur there, but your resident Gravenberch connoisseur is back, ladies and gentlemen. He missed a good chance, but Gravenberch stocks people keep on investing because it looks like, oh, we have a good one. Happy Wednesday.
It did, yeah. I thought it was unlucky for him to like miss that one. Obviously, if he makes that one, the game changes, and I really feel like still that we win that game like 5-2 or something like that. But it's I don't know. Yeah, trying to get over it with the international break now. You would think, we normally do an international break. John was mentioning it before we went on air. It's kind of like hard to find like headlines. It's kind of like dead, just like some stupid interviews where people talk about the national team and it's how good to be back with the team again and stuff, all that kind of crap. And that's not. Well, thank God we have refereeing to make stupid statements to kind of like keep us coming back for more. So let's talk a little bit about that because Howard Webb has been talking. And when Howard Webb talks, you listen and laugh and laugh and laugh. Okay, so let's go with this headlines over here and talk about what he's saying. And I called this, John, when this happened and when they said, oh, we're going to review this. I called it then that they would come out saying, we fixed it. We're just not going to say check complete anymore. At the very end over there, it says, then at that moment, not just saying check complete, because what are you check completing? I mean, did it take this kind of a fiasco to, they can like really send this shit to me and I can troubleshoot it like in like 30 seconds and be like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Did they really take a fiasco to figure that out?
Yeah, it looks like it did. You'd think that these things would basically be common sense, considering again, this is the most valuable league in the world, right? Most expensive clubs, most expensive players, highest media budget, right? And then you have referees who are barely better than what, a Division 4 or Division 5? Oh man. And good morning, Ryan. I caught that. But yeah, honestly, Tim, I wouldn't be surprised. Like anyone, if they come up with like a summary of how they go about things and they release that to the public, everyone is going to be nitpicking. Everyone's going to be poking holes at it because now that it's been exposed to like, the mainstream, it's pretty bad for them. And, that whole Howard Webb thing, I was telling you at the start of the broadcast, he just made it worse. Like imagine they send him out there to go like, all right, Howard, we're kind of in a mess here. We need you to do a bit of damage control. And when he comes back, like, Howard, what are you doing, buddy? Like that's the entire thing.
They had just forgotten about it, Howard.
Right. Like he just reminded everyone how much of a mess it is. And listen, it's not surprising at all. Not one bit.
Yeah, I think it was in the Discord channel, which I'll post a link over here. If you're not on there, you should definitely hop on there. If nothing else, to catch on gems from the Polish prince like that. But he was saying like they really need a much better PR team to kind of like make statements on their behalf, Gordo, because like what is he even saying? And it feels like maybe this is why they're not transparent, because God forbid the shit that happens if we got access to everything. But at the same time, maybe if they were more transparent and show this stuff, we could have helped them troubleshoot and be like, hey, before something really bad happens, you guys should probably fix this.
Yeah, and what's the saddest part is he had Michael Owen, who clearly, like in that show, he had Michael Owen. Basically, it sounded like Howard Webb wrote the questions that Michael Owen asked him, right? It was so instead of Michael Owen being like, what the fuck happened? It was very much like, I know you guys are trying very hard. Like, what else can you do? And then he had 2 weeks to figure out how he was going to play this in a positive light, and he couldn't do that. And to me, the whole thing reeks of May 1st, 2003, when President Bush got on that aircraft carrier and said, "Mission accomplished." Like, where are you getting your information? It's just, like, yeah, we need public intervention. That's for sure. I think it would fix it. I really do. They used to do this thing back. Those of you that have watched the Premier League for a long time know that Setanta used to be the only place you could watch Premier League games, and they used to do once a week. 2 fans would basically be the commentators of the game, and that was the best game of the week, even if it was the worst game between the 2 teams. And that's what we need: a couple fans in the VAR booth, one from each team, to kind of talk it out.
Yeah, they could probably reach something a lot better than what they're coming up with. Chris says the rules of the game have been so overcomplicated by stupid language. It's always going to be a mess. But here's the thing, when you put so much time, I don't know, you read a legal contract, right? You accept these terms, like at the end before you. Now they do it before they. What I love is like they do this like on like PlayStation and stuff. John will know. Like, I mean, there's a game and you have to like read all this supposedly and accept it before you can start playing the game. I like now how the accept does not come up until you scroll down to the bottom. Like,
Right.
They want to make sure. I read it all when I scrolled it all the way to the bottom because of legal stuff and all that. But when something goes like this specific, usually the language gets almost idiot proof. I mean, especially something that's scrutinized so much. It's almost like every time they fix the language or they think they fixed the language, it's almost like they're making it worse because like it's almost like there's nobody troubleshooting this. They're just kind of like making their own thing. And they're coming out of that meeting like, that sounds good, right? Okay, let's have lunch. And then they leave and nobody says, hey, wait. Like there is no, they need a focus group or some shit for what they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember during the interview, there was like, I think he mentioned someone by nickname. Like he was like Ollie. And then one dude was like, yeah, was that Michael Oliver, the 4th official, or I'm not sure. So there's clearly a miscommunication, like in terms of who is being addressed. Like who is supposed to be involved in everything?
I think we all thought it was Oliver.
Right.
He was the 4th ref. That was the initial assumption. I can't remember who brought it up. I don't know if it was like Chris or somebody brought it up that Ollie actually was like the dude in charge of VAR.
Oh, well there we go.
How is he that like, so is he like on pins and needles knowing something is going to get fucked up that he's like, stop it. He's like Ollie's on the phone telling us to shut the fuck down kind of thing. I just did not understand it. But yeah, go ahead. Go back to your point. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I saw this point on Twitter and like it might be comparing apples to oranges, but like in an aircraft control tower, they have very specific language, right? In terms of organizing everything in order to avoid mess ups. Like, again, it's apples to oranges because for one, you're dealing with lives for one, and then the other is just a game where people kick around a football. But then regardless, you'd think again with everything so high stakes, with millions of dollars at stake in terms of like promotion, relegation, Champions League places and all that, you'd think these guys would have something as basic as language to avoid any miscommunication, any misinterpretation nailed down. And obviously that's not the case, as good old Howard Webb showed us appearing in that whole thing. So.
When that happens, Gordo, like when it is kind of like almost like this obvious, right? Like the incompetent, you're like, they can't be this incompetence, right? You know how they say like never assume malice when incompetence will, suffice as an explanation. But then it's almost like, when you are like, what is that? Is that Clark's law or something like that? When ignorance becomes malice, because there's no way you can become that ignorant unless you're doing it on purpose. I'm paraphrasing it, but it's something along those lines. I can't remember what it was, but
we're getting all philosophical now at American.
I was gonna say I can't say
for this, but it almost seems like they're doing it slightly on purpose, where it's a little vague to give themselves a little wiggle room when either something goes wrong or they do it the way they want it and kind of still can't fit in because there's so much gray area.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I know you. I mean, you guys all work professionally, and I don't know about you.
We work. I know about professionally.
whenever we implement any changes here at my job, it's like there has to be a proposal, and then everyone who is anybody kind of looks at it, decides, and it goes through like marketing, legal, and all that. Even when we change little things on pamphlets, you got to get people involved. It's like, what are the impacts here? What are the impacts here? Basically, like, when you pull that string, 4 or 5 things are also going to be pulled by it. So you can't just make a change. But here it seems like it's either incompetency or they literally went, hey, we got this tool VAR. Let's just see how it goes.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, Chris says that whole conversation. Yeah, it was so bad and poorly, I might add, like poorly scripted. Where if it was a movie, it would be like a B-rated movie. Like you're like, who the hell wrote the script? Nobody talks like this. Nobody asks like this. Blackjack says simply not fit for purpose. Poor organization, poor culture, consistently poor performance. Third-party provider. It almost scares me more in some ways though, because you got to figure if they're under this much impact or like influence this much, I would be afraid how much a third party would be influenced, because now there's going to be even more backstage stuff involved, and I would almost feel like we would even have less faith, John. Well, let me ask you, if there's something like that happening, where they get like this third party, right? Like you don't know these guys, they're Joe's refereeing services. Would you have more or less confidence in a third party coming in to ref it?
At this point, yes. Like
Really?
how can it get worse? Like how can it get worse? Right? Like how can it get worse? Like I mean, I might be tempting fate here, but how can it get worse? The most bare bones, clearest offside call in the history of football. I may be exaggerating that, but how can you get that? Like all you had to say was check complete, goal, and you couldn't get that right. How? Like I know it's a good question, Tim, but how? Like I mean, you and Gordo might have different ideas, but I can't see how it gets worse.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean,
Gordo came up with something. I could see it in his face.
Captain Obvious is the worst person to have in that. I mean, here's the thing: when it's scripted, but people who don't want to expose themselves or say something that they're not going to be able to control want a scripted interview, and that was obviously scripted. And I mean, I'm not going to name names, but having doing this for American Scouser, we've done some like different interviews, right? Like whether it be with sporter club presidents or just like random people, fans and stuff like that. And in most cases, people want to know the questions going into it. And I hate doing that stuff because I want it to be a natural interview. I want to ask you questions and you tell me what. I'll give you the gist of it. It's going to be about Liverpool. And then the rest of it is going to be that. And when you give an answer, even when we talk now, I might ask a question. If Gordo says something, I might just do a follow-up and say, what did you mean by that? Or, ask him to clarify it. When Michael Owen is just going by script over there, regardless, he could ask a question. Howard Webb could have said like, blah, 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 blah. And then Michael Owen was like, good point, Howard. And then just go on to the next question because it was so like roughly scripted. And yeah. I mean, it gets only worse, Gordo, where they then talk about the game for the Arsenal game, which, here's the thing, though. These are like ridiculously high profile games that these mistakes are happening in. That was the biggest game of the week last week, was us playing Tottenham. And this was obviously Arsenal and City playing. So all like huge games in the title. They somehow screwed up again. And Howard Webb says, well, it was extremely fortunate. Michael Owen doesn't want to have a negative impact on the game by overreacting. If that's the case, why the hell are we getting all these cards?
Yeah, that was my thought. Is like I already feel like, so in my other podcast, Kelly and I take a shot for every red card that there was during the weekend, and I feel like I've been more drunk on these
drunken show.
Yeah, I feel like I've been drunk on more podcasts than I've been in the last 5 years since we've done it, and it's only week 7, so it's like, what is he talking about here? It's like, we don't really want to affect the game, even though we gave Liverpool 2 red cards in one game. It's like, whose game don't you want to have a negative effect on? I mean, I hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but it seems like all these calls go in one team's favor, and it's that team wears powder blue, and now that's where I'll leave it at. But going back to like going third party Premier League, like living with my dad growing up, like he's very, very pessimistic because he's British, and he then coming over here, And seeing how the NFL is basically, and I don't mean anything against you, Temujin, because I know you love that sport, but it's basically one giant commercial with a game kind of pieced inside of it.
Oh yeah.
So my dad's like, with the game becoming more popular in the US and with the officiating going this way, he's always said to me, you know how it's going to be one day is Progressive, you know, because it'll come up and say, you know, halftime is sponsored by Progressive, and then it does start to be like extra time is sponsored by Nike or whatever. And he's like, the more they pay, then the more exciting that extra time becomes, right? And so like, if a team, you know, if there really is that written script type stuff happening in the background, it'll be that way with third parties. It's like, all right, are we doing it? Is the sponsor Sprint or whatever? And let's, they've paid, they are in our gold tier of sponsorship. So we have to have a red card, a goal, and something else happen controversially in this little segment of where Sprint has purchased their advertising. So that's the most pessimistic view of it.
Yeah, I can kind of see that, right? They're going to be like, these Sprint extra minutes are really a killer, Joe. And, you know, like in the commentator booth.
Yeah, right. And my dad would, at first, when they first started highlighting it, my dad he's also like a stats nut too. So he'd start writing down things that would happen. Oh, Progressive, and seeing if there was any correlation. Oh, every time Progressive sponsors it, there's a goal or whatever. That's what he was looking to find out. And obviously, that's very conspiratorial and very, very pessimistic. But he was hell bent on it for a number of years.
I agree to him. By the way, I do like NFL football, but really, it is very difficult to watch a game from beginning to end, even when it's the 49ers. Like the Sunday Night Football, because we were kicking Cowboys' ass, it was kind of fun to watch. But it's a lot of commercials and breaks and stuff like that, and very little game. I mean, I can honestly, like, I think like they've done like the worst thing by freaking introducing like Red Zone channel and stuff, because it's almost like once you do that, man, there's no way you can go back to watching a regular game because there's like so much stoppage. But you know, and that's the problem, right? I think soccer, one thing American sports does really well is milking the hell out of sports financially. Absolutely. So commercializing the hell out of it. And I feel like they have been looking in Europe and saying, wait, man, we have like the world's biggest sports over here, billions watching it. These guys milk this much money from just their continents over there. We could be like really reaping in some cash. And I feel like more and more, sadly, they will get these. I was watching a Europa game the other day, and they broke the commercial break. Like, I've never seen that. It was only like 15 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
The entire screen went.
Yeah, I saw
it. Wasn't even in picture. Like, the entire screen went to a commercial. And I know they were getting ready for like a free kick, like the wall was being set and stuff. But I was like, what the hell? Like, how did this happen?
What game was this?
I can't remember. I don't know. It was just on, like, as I was working, like a game was on. That's why I was like when I heard the commercial, that's when it got my attention. And then I was like, why did it stop suddenly? Is it halftime or something? And then no, it was just like a 15-second commercial.
Alan here with a good one, by the way. The PGM
I wish they had a sponsorship from Reckless Coffee, our sponsor for the morning show, because they need to wake the fuck up. But here's a good point by Blackjack here. Because at the same time, when we talk about refereeing and when we talk about over here, John, especially NFL had this issue a lot. And they're very obviously, NFL probably cares about its brand more than anybody else cares about their brand in terms of how they protect it. They had to fix a lot of problems because there was a lot of like, what is a catch, blah, blah, blah. I remember like 2-3 seasons that came on and on. Blackjack's point, I agree to, because at one point does Premier League or the powers that be or the money man say, hey, we can't fuck up this much because you guys are giving a bad name to the league. Will that ever come into effect? Or they're like, people are going to watch either way?
Well, you'd certainly hope so. You'd think, like, considering how the world is run, that money will eventually talk. But like this, I don't know, like VAR has been around for like 3 years now. And every year you'd assume that they'd find a way to iron out the kinks. And, you know, like each year is another year wiser and all that. But each year, I don't know, at least in the Premier League, right? It's somehow there's something new that makes it worse. So as much as I would want to be positive with this, I don't know, Tim. Like, again, money might talk, but money should have spoken long ago, I feel. Like, even if there's one ginormous incident that happened at the inception of VAR, you'd think that the people responsible would correct this right away, and that hasn't happened. And here we are, like, butchering a simple communication between give the goal off because it's onside, right? So I don't know. I'm not super positive on
See,
that.
but money only starts talking when it's getting affected, because I don't think so far all these. I mean, we talk about it because we follow the sport and watch the game, but that's the problem, right? We follow the sport and watch the game. We're already giving the money, so the money people are not going to care until there are some fans who say it's all freaking scripted anyway, man. It became WWE or something like that, which heck, there's people watch that too, but still,
I watched that when I was a kid.
yeah, there's still there's a lot of. I was looking at like totally going off script over here, but we were looking at like sports tickets. We went out to dinner with Ange, and we were looking at sports tickets, and everything is like like $40, $60. Why some sports are so expensive? I needed a separate explanation, a different morning coffee show for that. But WW something, I don't know. It was like 3 letters, and it had wrestling. I don't follow them, so I'm not really like know about them. But it was $178 ticket. And I was like, dude, people know it's fake. Like, why they're paying $178 to go to a scripted show kind of a deal. But I know there's a lot of people who are still into it and love it. But going back to that money, Gordo, do you think it will ever come to a point where even the money people will be affected enough to care and say, hey, you guys got to fix this? Or as long as City is winning, if the money is coming from there, they're not going to care.
Well, yeah, that's the underlying, conspiracy theory is that, they're lining pockets, which is possible because we still haven't seen any of the books. They've got enough lawyers. That the first one that happened with UEFA, what was there, 23 lawyers they hired to kind of sweep that one under the rug. So there's always that. But the other issue is nowadays, most of the like TV and marketing, they're only concerned about hits and tags and all this stuff. And when the accidents are made like this, I mean, and John even said last week that like he couldn't avoid seeing something about the call. And to them, that's people interested, that's people getting engaged. So they probably don't see, although they'd probably want the right calls to be made, especially if most of the publicity is an angry one. They're looking at it as revenue, as all this, everyone's talking to the Premier League. Another call is blown, and now the focus goes away from Serie A and the Bundesliga and all that, and all they're looking for is the hits and the clicks on social media.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Like the fact that they do get the attention, but when does attention become negative attention, John? Like, do they wait and be like, okay, man, for 3 weeks, no fuck ups, let's lay low, and then we'll rise again, and then just come back and like screw something else up, kind of a thing? Because you're gonna figure after a while. First is like initially when you have something going on, like all publicity is good publicity kind of thing. But after a while, it becomes this is kind of like biting us in the ass now. Premier League is so big. Hey, if you're as old as I am and old as dirt, leagues come and go. I mean, I remember Serie A being the pinnacle of like, the Champions League of leagues, if you will. Like all the good players went to Italy and stuff like that. And I think at that time, you could not see that dynamic changing anytime soon, like when you look at it. So when we look at Premier League now, it feels like, yeah, this dynamic can never change. But like I say, we thought that 15 years ago. Obviously, things have changed and the money is becoming a bigger factor. But still, these things shift. And the best way to prevent that is to make sure people are kind of like sold on it.
Yeah, well, it's just really funny that this whole conversation delving into conspiratorial and everything, which is completely valid, by the way, is stemming from someone getting a clear onside call wrong. Like it's just like a butterfly effect of everything. It's just, I can't get over it. Like, in terms of what you're asking, Tim, I certainly think that the Premier League isn't too big to fail as well. Like, I think there might come a point where, especially if this whole thing continues, where people are going to go like, the product is getting awful because of the officiating. Kind of like, not to make another American sport analogy here, right? Compared to the 90s and the 2000s, I believe the NBA isn't as popular in terms of ratings compared to those eras and people like oversimplify it with the NBA becoming too 3-point centric, which it's an oversimplification, but I think it's more than that. But I think it's also a valid kind of thing. So like kind of linking it to the Premier League, the officiating might be what could possibly topple the Premier League in terms of like having the influence as the best league in the world. Hopefully it would, because as much as we would like the Premier League to continue being watched, its reach getting expanded, we just want the game called properly, and that comes before anything else, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Gordo, I don't know if you were around when Serie A was the shit. And I honestly, now that I think about it, I can't really recall, like, obviously there wasn't one incident that were like, pack your bags, we're going to England. But, I can't remember, apart from like the money and the investment, shifting over, I can't remember specific reasons why it started to fail. But do you ever see a scenario where it starts shifting? And I don't know where it would shift, I guess. But you got to figure, back, the Premier League has changed a lot since the money has shifted in terms of number of teams that are better, especially compared to the rest of Europe. How many players? I mean, I remember the World Cup, they sent like 190 players or something crazy like that. So all the good players are coming here. But do you see a scenario where that starts shifting somehow?
Yeah, the Super League when that finally kicks off. Because honestly, I was totally against it, and the more and more shit like this keeps happening, and the more that it's like, 115 breaches, and that came out like a year ago now, and we haven't heard anything about it. The more and more it happens, it's just like, get these teams out. Just get them out, let them do whatever, let them do the Harlem Globetrotter World Tour or whatever, and they can do whatever they want, and they'll get the TV money, and let's get back to the sport here instead of all this other nonsense. So I think that's when it goes, because I actually do think the more and more money that gets involved, especially now that Saudi Arabia has kind of got a big hand in the pool, that we'll see more and more push towards it, because although everyone apologized and was like, sorry, our bad, they haven't stopped talking about it. This is all something that they've got a 5-year plan for sure. It may not come to fruition in 5 years, but these guys are not going to give up on that, because that is a money cash cow that they will not give up. They know people will watch it. One of the things that we did, and we're all guilty of it, is we showed them that despite all of the human rights violations, despite all the nonsense about it being in the winter, despite all the garbage about why is Qatar, who has never even we've really hadn't even heard about it until the World Cup was presented there. All that aside, we still watched. We still went to the games in droves, despite all, LGBTQ stuff, the women issues there, and we watched. And so they know that it doesn't matter anymore. It can be as vile and as corrupt as they want to, and we're all still going to pay the money. We're all still going to tune in every week, regardless. And so that hasn't gone away. And that's when the Premier League will fade from the global spotlight, because everybody will be interested in Barcelona versus Manchester United in LA. And it'll be an actual legitimate game. That's when it will fade.
Honestly, the more I see this, though, the more that thought scares me. I mean, when it first came out, and obviously, we didn't like some of the other stuff, like the lower leagues and all that. This almost, I mean, I agree. Like, we're gonna head there. I don't know if I'll be around, but John, you'll definitely be watching Super League one day. But I worry more now about how scripted that will be. I don't think that improves refereeing at all. A couple of points over here that the cynic in me just does not see happening. Like Ryan says, take money out of the Premier League winnings and pay for better refs. There is never enough pay. I think if we've ever seen anything, there is never enough pay. You can pay these guys $1 million. Some sheikh from the corner will be like, hey, how about $2 million for a penalty kick? And you'll get your penalty kick. I mean, one thing we know is no greed is ever satisfied. So paying these guys more, I don't think is a way. To go with that, as much as I want to believe what Chris says, like players going to look at this and say they're going to want to come play in this league, I think the whole Saudi Arabia league shoots that one down, because players don't give a damn. They just want to get the paycheck. Maybe you won't have as many coming in, but I mean, ultimately, it's not like there has to be a competitor, John, that they would go to. Well, and not, I mean, nobody's going to the Saudi Arabia League and they're like, their officiating is top notch or something like that. And there has to be another legit top league for them to say, well, I'm not going to go to the Premier League where all this fucking bullshit is happening. I'll go over here. there is really no alternative right now. It's kind of like a monopoly when it comes to young players who want to make a name for themselves. That's what everybody's, apart from like maybe like Real Madrid and Barcelona. I know like especially South America and stuff, a lot of kids grow up with the dream of playing there. But overall, I mean, if you ask any player, Champions League and then Premier League is really where they want to be in
Yeah,
terms of their career.
yeah, no question. It's unfortunate that the Premier League has such a hold in terms of like world football. Like I remember back in the day when my dad, he kind of watches soccer as well. Serie A, La Liga were pretty much on the level back then before the Premier League kind of like left them behind.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate that it's like this. So I don't know, like in terms of the players wanting to stop going to the Premier, and of course the influence and the reach that a Man United, that a Liverpool, that a Manchester City now has in terms of their counterparts in the other not domestically and internationally, is just unmatched. So I don't see that happening, unfortunately.
Ryan says, let's just do robots. Human can't do shit right. But you know what's like some Russian 13-year-old will hack into the system and like Dynamo Moscow or something like that will win everything outright because of some shady refereeing calls due to a hack job over there. But yeah, sadly, I mean, yeah, I do not see it improving a lot. Let me ask you this, Gordo. You think all this recent exposure will kind of force them to pay a bit more attention, like the scrutiny will help performance? Because they couldn't just issue an apology and move on as they normally would.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it happened the very next weekend in another marquee fixture helped even more, because there is always that little bit where it's like, oh, they're complaining because they're always finishing in second and they have like this great manager and they're trying to do it the blue collar way and they keep losing out to this oil mongering Man City. And the fact that it happened in the Arsenal game too is like, all right, something's going on, because that should 100% have been a red card. Even before VAR, I feel like that would have been a red card. And for them to miss that too in the very next weekend, in the biggest game of the weekend, you could argue, that helps a lot. That helps probably more than the Diaz one. The Diaz one brings it to light the way that Liverpool pushed through. I thought everyone thought that was a positive direction for the club to take, and kind of putting the pressure on the refs. And then with it happening in the very next weekend in a very big game, I think that helps as well. So I hope that all this negative spotlight is enough to be like, all right, we got to do something, because right now we're affecting the league. Luckily for Arsenal, like imagine if that game had finished 1-1 or City won the game, like coming from behind or something. I feel like it would be a much bigger story. So they kind of escaped a little bit the fact that Arsenal won the game. Yeah. But if the result had been different, I think we'd be calling for heads.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I think the result saved their ass from becoming even higher profile. Now it's just like, it didn't affect the score anyway. He didn't want to impact the game and stuff. We move on. Whatever the hell that means. He didn't want to negatively impact the game. Call what's on the freaking field. So like a goal would negatively impact the game. So you're not gonna like give it to them. You're like, this is gonna just screw up this entire game, boys. You know. So they got lucky that Arsenal squeaked in the win. I think that would be a much bigger story. Looking back, I wish in some ways that they didn't get that win, so that it would be a bigger story as well. But I want to like pick the brains of the guys on the panel show tonight, because it would be interesting to get like an opinion out of, a guy like Shay or Alex and stuff like that, kind of like out of like the big six, if you will, how they view it. Because when they get screwed, do they look at it as good, they should fix it, or they're like, serves you guys right? Because obviously when when Fulham gets screwed, it doesn't become as big of a story as Wolves got screwed like very openly, and it kind of like went away, and they got screwed again this week. That's a whole different story with that penalty kick and stuff. Before we move on, do not forget to check out Reckless Coffee Roasting. Link is right below, right there. RecklessCoffeeRoasters.com, our sponsor for the morning coffee show. Go check them out. It's never too early for Christmas shopping, even though I usually wait till the very end. But don't do as I do. You might want to, it's a good concept actually I know it's going to be on my list for some people, but go definitely check them out. Reckless Coffee Roasters are our sponsor for all our morning shows. So go support those guys over there by checking out the websites. and making a purchase. Tell them American Scouser sent you, like they do in the old promos. Okay, let's go over here. And the next one. This is, we can blame John for this because he's the one who sent this in. This is FootMob's, right? Let's go over here. Is FootMob's season rating so far? This is basically our highest rated players in those positions so far. John, what did you think of this when you see it? I know, like, FootMob, SofaScore, there's a lot of like different things that go to the equation. So you can have a shit game, but if you have an assist, it suddenly looks like you had a decent game and stuff like that. But what do you make of it? Or what does this tell you when you look at this?
Well, yeah, we were talking about it at the start of the show where some of us had varied opinions on these ratings, of course, as everyone would. But I'd like to start off on a positive note and agree that obviously that 7.9 for Salah is quite accurate. I think he's still been our best on-field player, like considerably. Everyone's saying he's not scoring as much, but 5 goals, 5 assists, like by this international break is just insane. So anyone who thought that he'd be again declining after another year where 1 year older, he's still pretty much world class. Soboslai as well. Like, I know we had high expectations from him, but I guess I'll toss this question to you guys. Did he exceed expectations? Did he meet them? Or are you guys still expecting more from him? Like, that 7.7 is a pretty decent rating. But obviously, I don't know what you guys think about that. Start with you, Tim, maybe.
Oh, shit. I was about to pass it to Gordo. Oh, okay.
Right.
I was just going to be like, here you go. Like, hot potato. I feel like he has exceeded expectations. I don't think we expected an impact this fast, in this scope, this early. Let's put it that way. I mean, thanks to Megan in our Discord channel, I have like kind of looked for him. Otherwise, it wasn't the guy I was like seeking out to watch or whatever. But coming into the Premier League and stuff like that, I thought the adjustment period would be a lot longer, and I didn't expect this good this early. Having said that, I do expect a lot more. I think, when you watch him, there are still some things to his game that will improve. Seeing his work rate, like I think how he presses and if he goes at the ball, sometimes he feels like, what I like. When I watch him, especially when he's pressing, he looks like a kid in FIFA who wants to get the ball as fast as possible so he can go and score. That's like, he wants to do something to get the ball, he will score, as opposed to thinking about not conceding first, not defensive first. Like, he takes some risks, and they do sometimes pay off. But I feel like sometimes it puts that wing in a bad situation. Like we saw that at, I can't remember what goal it was, where somebody just like waltzed into the box. Was that the Chelsea game? I can't remember. But I like just basically went through Matip because Szoboszlai was more focused on taking the ball going forward as opposed to making sure that dude didn't cut in and stuff like that. But I still feel like there are so many things that can improve in this game. And even at the price tag, Gordo, he feels like a steal somehow.
Yeah, 2 big things. One is a lot of times these ratings are based on previous seasons, like hosting, comparing a player to a previous, or at least, their previous appearances in the Premier League. Szoboszlai, let's be honest, apart from very few people, nobody probably knew who he was. So I don't think they have really a baseline to compare him to. The other thing that always surprised me, going back to your bargain statement, is when a player makes the first couple of appearances for a big club and they don't really hit the ground running, our excuse, and it's not just our excuse, it's everybody from every team, is he's settling in, it's a new country, you got to give him a second. So I feel like we should do the same for players like this. He's doing fantastic, but he's also just settling in. So I feel like there's more to come. I think it's very positive because you can't just make that excuse for the negatives. You also have to say the same thing. I mean, Szoboszlai is in the same position that many players are when they come into a new country and a new league and a new team and a new system, and he's excelling. So you can only imagine that it goes up from there. So I think it's really positive.
Yeah, I mean, you got to figure he is very mature for his age. The fact that he caps his national team and things like that. I mean, he's well beyond his years, as they would say. In terms of like how he carries himself and how much experience he comes with despite his age. right? In terms of like international soccer and, you know, stuff like that. Not just, oh, I mean, obviously all these guys have been playing soccer all their lives, but in terms of like big scene experience, he's had a lot of it. So that's kind of like a huge ordeal. And I think it has really helped him kind of blend in. And I think he's a perfect fit to the system with his work rate and everything. One thing that shocked me, and I think this is what goes to the ratings there, John, that Jones is not here. I think somebody mentioned it in the comments as well. I can only assume that his red cards gave him like a -5 points or something, so he got bumped.
Yeah, for sure. Again, we were talking about it before the start of the show. Like stats play, like immediate stats, and play such a big part in how these things are calculated. And Jones has been one of our best midfielders to start. Like the premier midfielder premier midfield rather to start the season has been McAllister, Szoboszlai, and Jones. Not even a question.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering why Elliott is there with his eyesore of a 6.4 rating. So I don't know. Like I was just like, this is supposed to be our best third midfielder, Elliott. Like, come on, not really. But yeah. I was looking at the comments when we were discussing it, Tim, and Saidu commented here where obsessed with Gravenberch as
hold on. Speaking of obsessed with the Gravenberch, leave it to John. Go ahead, John.
Right. Of course, I'm bringing it up as the Gravenberch connoisseur of American Scouser. I have to bring it up when he posted this. My eyes I was like, "Whoa! Did I see my boy being mentioned here?" So, Klopp obsessed with Gravenberch as a multifunctional.
John's headset vibrates anytime somebody
right.
in the comments.
Why can't he play as a 6 since he's better than McAllister defensively? So obviously, guys, we could talk about McAllister all show, how he hasn't been the solution to the number 6 position. He's made some mistakes here. He's had some good moments as well, but we can clearly see that he's not the man to be in that number 6 position. So I guess I'll start with you here, Gordo. Can you see Gravenberch maybe taking that spot? Would you persist with McAllister there? Or would you rather, despite him having a mistake in him maybe, or not being ready and all that, would you just try and have Endo there for just to see how he goes? Because everyone's been saying like, oh, he has a loose touch in him, he's not as physical, but McAllister's kind of like the same thing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, you have to give the players that you bought, right away, that you targeted, that, let's be honest. I mean, when we did a podcast a long time ago before we signed him, and all of us were like, he's just come off of winning a World Cup. He's got a couple of other bigger teams that are in the Champions League coming after him. Liverpool probably are not his first choice. So you got to play it, because obviously I think that he took a gamble coming to us. He pretty much guaranteed Champions League football and decided against it. I want to be part of a part of Liverpool 2.0. And Klopp obviously wants him, and I think we all want him to be part of the starting lineup. So you can't take him out of the starting lineup. And if currently he's the best fit for that role, then you have to play him there. The other thing was, that's the only options we had at the time. I think Gravenberch is eventually going to be the player that Klopp wants in that position. However, we all know that it sometimes takes Klopp a long time to get somebody up to where he deems them possible to put in. And really the only reason that Szoboszlai and McAllister have made it in there is because we didn't have another option at the start of the season. So they kind of had to be slotted in there because we didn't have, the backdrop of somebody else more experienced to put in those positions. I mean, he wasn't going to start, Elliott, Jones, and whoever from the U21 team coming in to fill those positions at the start of the year, wanting to get him up and running. So I think eventually we'll see Gravenberch there. You also got to remember that he's 20, right? He's like 20 and a half years old, so he's still a very, very young kid. And so I don't think Klopp wants to push him into that position just yet, because there is a lot of responsibility there. And sometimes the youth, as we see a lot with Jones and Elliott, is they get this burst forward, especially the way that Liverpool play, and then they get caught out. And so you want somebody that really knows the position is, yes, it's so exciting to go up and be part of the action, but really this position needs you to be versatile and a little more defensive. So I think Klopp is hesitant to put him in there. But yeah, I do think eventually we'll see him there permanently. And hopefully we'll leave McAllister.
Ryan says Mac isn't the answer in the 6 unless he has a partner there, and he has played like the double pivot before. And then Sayu says the over switch of players playing position is part of our problem. We're probably compounding to it in some ways, by putting Mac there. I just don't. And Besetic, I don't know how he fits in here in the equation overall. I think we're kind of still. I think the early success, I guess, in some ways, if you call it that, of this midfield kind of almost felt like, okay, we're done. Like, the plan is in place. This is what we're rolling with. Whereas I think it's still obviously building. It's kind of like, like really early. Mac was pushed back there by force. Here's the question to you now, John. If you take Mac out of there and you put your boy, you be out to get your boy somehow in the 11, like, right? And I do agree. I think he might go into that role. It will be interesting to do. It will be after this international break because he's one of the ones who did not go to national duty. So he can really cram defensive midfielders staying back. But so we just talked about Soboslai, right? And then we just talked about Jones. So who is left holding the bag if you play Gravenberch at the 6? While I really like on the double pivot thing, I think we all know Klopp and systems rarely change. We just make people learn or do what Saida says and switch their positions to like fit in, or we basically move on from them like we did with Carvalho and stuff like that. It just did not fit the system one way or the other. We didn't try to do something that would help him. We were like, well, I guess you're not fitting in and then you're out. Who is left holding the bag then if you're putting your boy in?
So I think Gravenberch can play the 6, but I think his long-term solution is going to be on that left side of the midfield. So it's going to be a rotate. It's going to be him and Mac competing for places. I honestly think Mac is just there. I think for now he is our permanent 6, right? So I think honestly our best midfield is Mac, Gravenberch, and Soboslai. Honestly, like as much as I love Jones, I'm gonna compliment him every time I can. As much as I love Jones, just going forward, Gravenberch just gives you so much more. I feel like I know he missed that sitter against Brighton last weekend, but I feel like he eventually, especially when he gets up to speed, we have a player there. But to answer your question, Tim, we're probably forgetting about Endo in this whole thing. Like,
no, I'm not. No, we're not. But I didn't even put him in the equation. He's definitely holding the bag. I figured.
Right. I want Endo to be there because I feel like Mac is wasted, but I feel like the passing, like I feel like Klopp kind of sees Mac as kind of like a Thiago, where he can operate, or maybe like going back a little bit, kind of like how Gerrard played that 6 under Rodgers, where he has kind of like that quarterback vision where he can spray the passes left and right. The only problem is, and the reason why we conceded more than 50 goals during that title challenge is because Gerrard wasn't a natural DM. So I kind of feel like how, Gerrard wasn't a natural DM, McAllister isn't a natural DM as well. So I honestly think this is a stopgap for January because we're going to be going for a proper defensive midfielder. But for now, to answer your question, I feel like Mac is going to be holding that load.
Do you agree, Gordo? Who is your ideal midfield right now?
The same. It would be the same. Mac at 6, and then ahead of him, Soboslai and Gravenberch. And maybe there's something there. Maybe there's, we saw Klopp kind of steer away from his tactics. And like you said, he's kind of slow to do that. And he really likes the way that he wants to play. But utilizing Trent in a way that at the end of last season where we haven't seen him before and how much impact that has. Maybe there's something there with like a 3-man group because Soboslai is also a versatile midfielder that could drop into that 6 and play a little bit more defensively. So you've got 3 players that can do the role. They're not, let's admit, they're not going to make, the world 11 at defensive midfielder, but they definitely can hold their own there. And maybe there's something there with movement that he's looking at where you've got 3 players that can play on the ball. They're both, or all 3 of them are good going forward. They can all have a shot when they want to. They can mix it in with the defenders and they can mix it in with the offense. And maybe there's something there where he's got like this rotating triangle where all 3 guys are going to learn that position. And then that position is just going to be, one in, one out and just confuse the crap out of the middle of the field. I would love that, but we'll see.
I think that's one thing I liked seeing in the second half. One of the few things I liked seeing in the second half, I guess, was how Mac and Trent worked a little bit better in the middle of the field where, they were able to split 2 midfielders and get Mac open on the ball, basically pushing forward. And that's when we kind of created some chances. Still not sold on this Trent inverted fullback thing. I just am not. I still feel like we're hurting ourselves more than what we're gaining. I think it worked great last season, like Gordo was saying, because nobody was expecting it, including us, for Klopp to make a change like that. And you kind of saw people trying to adjust, not being able to figure it out, having had a full off season and having more teams now doing this inverted fullback thing. It's almost like, man, it's a lot of NFL references today, but like a running quarterback when they first came out, they're like, how the hell do you stop these guys? And then now everybody has like a different way to stop them. You have a spy, blah, blah, blah. So I feel like we're kind of hurting ourselves on that right wing. And I don't, so this is how like opinions matter. Kwanzaa and Matip have been our best center backs, says Ryan. I have not been, I know, I think the bar was set so high by Van Dijk. He is the one to blame for his, how he's disappointing people, because we still expect him to be Superman, and he was never going to be as he gets older and after the injury. I feel like this year's Van Dijk is a lot better than last year's Van Dijk, a lot closer to the old Van Dijk. You're not going to get old Van Dijk like you're not going to get old me. Meanwhile, Sizer says Matip and Gomez, he's tired of him. What?
Gomez, maybe.
7.0, bro.
I'm tired of Gomez, but Matip, come on.
I'm sick of you guys being tired of guys.
Where's the loyalty?
Where is the loyalty? Not only the loyalty, I feel like, Matip has been our best center back over the last month or so. Easily.
Right. You could argue that the whole Brighton game kind of fell apart when we subbed out Matip.
Yes.
When Konate came in, he was an absolute mess. Let's not mince our words here. And then Joey G coming in just made things even more of a mess. So oh man.
So
so I don't know why he gets so much hate. Go ahead, Gordo.
What do you guys like? This has always kind of bothered me a little bit about the team too. Is like, what about Nate Phillips and Reece Williams? Like, why didn't we stick with it? Because I felt like they were positive. I felt like they were probably the only reason we qualified for Champions League when they took the roles in. And I felt they were solid spot. You don't think so? No?
Nah. I mean,
I don't know.
Nat Phillips one. Like, he puts
over Gomez.
Everything. I think Nat Phillips will be a great center back at a team like Burnley or West Ham or somewhere like that. He just does not fit the system. He can't play that high line. Same thing with Reece Williams. We did not play the same way we did. And, they took us to the Champions League, or did we kind of change our style so much to be able to compensate for that? And really, Ali's header took us to the Champions League that year more than anything else. But yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying in terms of how they performed, but I think even then we knew, this is never going to be the big solution, because every time you saw Nat Phillips trying to track somebody down, you were like, this is not going to work, kind of a deal. What do you think, John?
Oh, yeah. What I think is that Nat Phillips to you is what Joe Gomez is to me.
Okay, all right. So I got a little bit of, okay, yeah, I'm delusional then, is what you're saying. Well, one thing, I don't know if you guys saw, but Jermaine Pennant was saying that he feels that Robertson's our weakest link, and with that, with those stats there, he's one of our best. He's got a 7.6. He's close to the top. What do you guys? First of all, what do you feel about that comment? And then secondly, how do you feel about Robertson? Because I feel like wouldn't say he's our weakest link, but he's definitely not having. I feel like he's being caught out a lot this year.
Yeah, I think he's not had the best season, but he's not had the worst either. Kind of like he's had some flashes, especially with like the goal that he scored. That's just peak Robertson there, driving forward, presenting himself as an option. But at the same time, you still have those lapses where, that Brighton goal, like, come on, man, clear that shit. Like, right? Like, it's your first job is to defend, right? Instead of putting the ball in the box sometimes. So, and I remember Gally making a point where, Robbo hasn't been the old Robbo. I agree. But then at the same time, he's still faster. He's still stronger than our next guy coming in, Tsimikas. So I think, hasn't been his best start, could still be better. But considering who's going to be replacing him, if we're going to be going down that road, no complaints for me. No complaints.
All right, here's the thing I have with Robo. I feel like Robertson's defending was always like this. He has always been the one to mess up the line. He has always been the one to be 2 steps behind Van Dijk and stuff like that. The deal was Van Dijk was Van Dijk. that was the Superman version, and you didn't even notice that Robo was screwing up the line. I don't think we have Superman Van Dyke anymore to clean up after Robertson as much as he was able to. So it exposes Robertson's defensive like vulnerabilities a lot more. And I think this whole Trent thing has also screwed up Robertson because that area is blocked. I mean, we were talking about it, and a lot of blame like was like, well, is it Diaz because he's like, he's too close to the wing. This is why I'm so against this inverted fullback thing. There is nothing on the right hand side except Mo. And so for you to worry about, there's nobody on that wing because Matip gets the ball where Trent should be getting the ball. And we almost feel like he doesn't want to push because he knows Trent is not going to drop back for him. So he keeps like making these half runs and then stops. He can't take advantage of that. Well, when you don't have to defend one wing, it's a lot easier to defend the other wing. You can kind of crowd that area. So I feel like Robertson does not have as much area to run into, even if Diaz is like too wide. Robertson has run through the middle where Mane was out wide. There's no room because everybody's protecting that line because there's no other wing. And now you're kind of putting Robertson a little bit more shifted in. One thing that I will agree that goes on Robertson himself is the fact that he has, I think somebody put it in the comments, that he has been definitely being like players are getting past him, which was not as big of a thing before. Like if he was in front of them, you knew who was going to get the ball. He did mess up the line or he would track back and stuff like that. But I feel like, yeah, more and more now, like when he's 1v1, people are getting past him. That's on Robertson. I think his rating is only high because he has that goal in here, for example. I don't think he's played the best out of that back line. I think that's why Fatmob makes it comical over here because I'm assuming the goal is what bumps him an extra point. He would probably be 6.6 for me. I think he got that over there. Last thing to talk to about this I want to ask you guys is, let's move to the forward over there. You see all the goals and assists and all that kind of stuff. But I think Ryan was mentioning it earlier, and we kind of talked about it in the Discord channel during the Brighton game. We talked about it on the Monday Night Podcast. Heck, we talked about it in the post-match. I still feel in my ideal starting 11, in most games, I would say 80% of the games, Dickler was saying 100% of the time. I'm saying 80% of the time, Gakpo is my center forwards. Since Anand is not here, let's get this out of the way. John, who are you putting? It's a big game. You got to win. You're playing against the top 6 team. Let's go that way. Because in those scenarios, I'm 100% putting in Gakpo. Who are you putting as center forward right now?
Who am I putting? I'm still going Nunez, man, because I feel like the games against the top 6, they're just so open. Like, okay, let's get it out of the way. We misjudged how Nunez would perform against Brighton very badly. Like he was worse than Anonymous. He was nowhere to be found, Nunez. And this is a bad game for him. It's not a good look for him. But I still feel like, since you mentioned the context of a top 6, how open that game would and how you need those little moments, that moment of difference, that moment of inspiration to kind of pull through. I feel like Mo, especially paired with Nunez, can be, kind of providing that breakthrough moment. Like, I don't know. It might just still be me riding his form of good games, but I'd still go Nunez, honestly.
Gordo.
I'm with you, Gakpo. I love Nunez. I think he's got potential to be in the starting lineup. But let's just look at the sample that we have. He's always better. I love him coming off the bench. And I said it, and I love him so much that in the pregame of Brighton, my feed cut out is how much love I was expressing of how much I love that guy coming off the bench. It's just like he is that live wire, but he's also like kind of chicken with his head cut off, going out there and just like going into tackles and playing defensively and making the runs and taking pop shots and not passing when he should. And sometimes that's enough to be like, oh, the game's kind of settled into itself in 60 minutes. Defenders are kind of taking a little bit of break. They're on the back heels. And then you bring in somebody like Nunez and it's like, what the hell is going on? And oftentimes just enough to create something, whether or not it's him that's actually scoring the goal or whether it's an assist or just like his confusion of just running all over the place is enough that I think he's way more valuable coming off the bench. I love the guy, but I think Gakpo is the guy that you start the game off with. He's good defensively. He's a big, strong guy. You can play him as alone up there, basically, if you wanted both wingers to kind of move in. And I don't think Nunes has that quite yet. And I think, like I said, his versatility of speed and defensive chaos is enough for me to leave him as somebody coming off the bench, because I think that's how he works more valuably for us.
I think this is a key statement here. Ryan says the chaos works in the last 30, not the first 60. And I think that's 100%. What I'm going for with the top. And I understand your point, John, in terms of like having more space in those games. But the problem I feel like is you're playing against teams where you have to press a lot better. While we have said his pressing has gotten better, it's his chasing and him starting the press what works. I keep saying that he had to think a lot this Brighton game, and that's why we saw it in Nunes that was like just lost, confused, 2 seconds late to everything, because he was like, do I go? Do we not go? Are we pressing? We're not pressing? They're passing well. We're not pressing? You know, he was always confused, it felt like, whereas he's more of a chaser, not a presser. And when you play against a team like City or Arsenal or whoever, and like Brighton, who pass in the back to make you chase and play around you a lot easier, I feel he's more like a detriment to the press than adding to the press. It's not just energy. I think Saito was saying in the comments that he plays like a 20-year-old, which, I mean, he's a young guy and he is raw, but he does remind me of when I used to go and play with my brother and his friends when I was like 12 or whatever. They were like 18, 19. And you go there and you're like, you know, you're playing with the big boys, so you're trying to make an impact. And, you know, like you're doing your stuff when you get the ball and stuff, but off the ball, you're just running like crazy to justify your existence. But really, are you really helping? Because, you know, you're just like chasing. You're just like you're pressing like an idiot by yourself because nobody else is running. So I feel like, yes, the chaos that comes in at the end becomes a lot more valuable.
So I guess my follow-up question is, what is the ideal opponent that Darwin would start? Because obviously the big guns top 6, but then we could also make an argument that Gakpo would be better suited to start against those low block teams because of his build-up play. So which is like the rest of the Premier League, if we're being real, right? So like, I guess my question is, what is the ideal team to start Nunez in? Because if we're talking about overall quality,
Gakpo is injured.
Right, if Gakpo,
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. An injury at this point, he could develop it. Like, I feel like if he does develop a little bit of calmness and he could change his style, because that would make a great player if he could be the calmness and he could be the outlet player and he could be the holding forward up there, and when he's starting, but then also bring that intensity when he comes off the bench. That'd be one of the best players in the Premier League for sure. But at this point, yeah, I would say an injury to Gakpo or somebody that couldn't fit that in the starting lineup would be the only place I'd start him, even in like the Champions Leagues. I mean, the Europa League, we gave him that run out, and we were talking pregame before that one, and Kazi had mentioned, you know, I think the reason that Salah and Nunes started that game midweek was to give him a little bit of, hey, let's get your confidence up. These guys let's beat the hell out of them. Let's go 4, 5, 6 goals here, and you guys are gonna get some of that confidence. And both of them were just, they weren't there. They couldn't get it, and it did nothing for his confidence. And then I was shocked that he started in Brighton, because I was like, what? You saw somebody that, you know, Union wasn't very good, and he couldn't do anything. He couldn't make an impact in that game. And to start him against Brighton, and let's be honest, you know, they had a midweek game. They had just gotten wiped away by Villa the week before, but it's still Brighton. You know, it's still Brighton under De Zerbi. They're still capable of a performance. They're at home. It shocked me that he started, and then I think we saw exactly what I think many of us would have predicted in his performance. So I don't think he's quite there yet.
Yeah, I think it was more lack of options against Brighton, really. I mean, you know, if Gakpo is healthy, if Jota is not banned, I think those guys are definitely starting over him against Brighton. I really think so. I don't think he was there by design, especially against a team that we have to be careful and more tactical when we press. But going back to your question, John, yeah, it's because I was about to say like Bournemouth home or Luton Town home, but I know you make a good point about he's not that effective when people sit back in a low block either. So he's not
like Jota as well, where if he gets a half chance, it's a goal, right? He misses quite a bit.
That's true. And I think though in a game like that, he can chase. you get some teams come to Anfield and they still try to insist on playing from the back. And against a team like that, and they're not as good at it as, City is or Arsenal is or Brighton is. You get a team like that, then you send him out there and it's like, go get him. And then, and then he goes and chases them and he can win you a ball and turn the ball over and stuff like that. But I think better teams can play around him a lot easier because of his undisciplined pressing. So as he gets more familiar with the language and stuff like that, I mean, Ryan says if we start a player based on his pay, we should change our name to Chelsea. And not only that, I feel like how much time are we going to give is the thing, I guess. We felt like, oh, it's the language barrier, blah, blah, blah. He had an off season. It's still really not there. But I'm sure Friday morning. Go ahead, Gordon.
Yeah, no, but I don't think we could dismiss his contribution because his his goal creation. I mean, I don't think what we need to give him an excuse because I think when he's been out there, he's got a ridiculous goal creation per minutes right now. So even though I don't want him starting, I don't think that, I think he's settled nicely because he's producing, which is the hardest part about why can't he start? When you look at his, minutes played for goal contribution, you're like, this is a starting player, but he just I just don't feel like he has enough. And I think, like you said, the comments have pointed out, 60 minutes at the beginning of the game is not where chaos needs to be. So yeah, I think it's really conflicting when it comes to Nunez because I love him, but I also don't want to see him out in the starting lineups.
The only thing that bugs me a little bit about that one, and I know we don't want to play people by pay, but I don't know if you want to pay that much to a guy who only gives you 30 minutes a game. Is that fair?
No, of course not.
Yeah, that's my thing. That's the guy that you signed for 30 million from the Dutch league. And then he's like, yeah, I mean, he's not, he's not a starter, but man, he comes off the bench and really does a thing for us. So I guess the key is going to be as time goes by, is that 30 going to be 60? Or is that going to be 90? I think part of it, I think Bickler was saying on the Monday Night podcast, I don't think he can physically give you 90 of Nunez, Nunez-ness, I guess, let's say, because I don't think he can give you that 90 minutes. It comes in spurts. So he comes in and he only has 30 minutes. He can go ape shit and do the chasing and the running and causing the chaos. And that does help. And at this point, let's just freaking use it. Ryan says at the top level, you pay for shit you don't need. And that's true too. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I can't wait for Friday morning because I'm sure Anand will make a huge thesis on why we need to start Nunez. So we'll ask him. Join us tonight for the Premier League panel show. Will be 4 of us on the panel. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about refereeing, but we'll probably talk about the Arsenal City game, and we'll kind of take a look at the season so far, where everybody's at. I know Tottenham was pleasantly surprised, but let's see if they see it long-term themselves as well, because looking at the strength of schedule, obviously they had the advantage so far. But tune in for that tonight. And then obviously tomorrow night we have the double-decker show with the Fantasy Boys as well as the Thursday night podcast. We'll see you guys later tonight. Have a great Wednesday, everybody. Take care.